Spider-Man No Way Home finally here. I want to talk about it. I'm going to start off talking very generic, no spoilers beyond what was already shown in the trailers, and then we're going to get into spoiler talk because I have so many thoughts on this movie that I just watched. So if you don't know the plot, essentially it takes place exactly after Far From Home. Spider-Man's identity is revealed by Mysterio. Everyone thinks he killed Mysterio. Well, not everyone, but it's very controversial. So he wants to take this all back. He goes to Doctor Strange, says, hey, can I take it back? I don't want anyone to know I'm Spider-Man. Things get messed up, the multiverse is open, all these villains from other universes are coming to try to kill him. So let's start there, because this is a big ask of the MCU to introduce the multiverse in this way, and I gotta say, I think it worked. The tone overall of this movie is very dark, darker than any, at least, MCU Spider-Man film we've seen, and possibly any Spider-Man film in general. Tom Holland's Spider-Man has been a happy-go-lucky Spider-Man up until this point, which is maybe more true to the comics, because he's definitely a high schooler, and you still feel that in this movie. He's trying to get into college, he's hanging out with his friends, he just wants a good time and doesn't want the responsibilities of being Spider-Man. But this film pushes him to make a choice, which really echoes a lot of themes from Spider-Man 2, which I really enjoyed. It's this whole idea that the people closest to you are going to get hurt if you continue being Spider-Man, and I love that he has to face these decisions. Other things about this movie that I love was a lot of characters were really fleshed out, specifically the characters of MJ, Ned, and Aunt May. I think they were really just kind of side characters in previous Spider-Man movies, but in this one it feels like they actually have a story and an arc. Their emotional depth is something that's really fun to follow, and especially the relationship between Peter Parker and MJ, it's really something special that you can connect to. Visually, this movie is stunning, and there are some parts where it's a little too much CG for my liking, and I want to see some more natural fight scenes, but I think it does a pretty good balance. Any movie that Doctor Strange is going to be in, you're going to have a lot of visual effects, and I think the visual effects that are used with him are really spectacular to see. The last thing I'll say pre-spoiler is that the plot is pretty good. I think it definitely takes some leaps, especially like with the Doctor Strange and the spell, but I think you're always going to have that with magic. You're always going to have these ideas that if you think too hard, you'll find the plot holes in them. And so this is a movie where you kind of have to let go of that and just accept that this is the rules that they are setting up, and I just have to get on board with it. It's enjoyable, it's fun. If you're a Spider-Man fan or a comic book fan at all, you're going to love this movie. Let's get into spoilers. You have been warned. So I think this movie is tough for me because I think I would have enjoyed it so much more if none of these things were spoiled for me. And I'm not even talking things in the trailer, but things that were just so obvious in the marketing of this film that people tried to keep hidden, but everyone knew what was going to happen. And that big thing is that Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire are indeed back. I have to say, the moment that they walked through the portals was so special, and even though I had a very strong idea that that was going to happen, it was still an emotional response that I felt. The crowd just cheered, and I haven't felt a crowd cheer like that since Endgame. It was incredible. We're seeing 20 years worth of Spider-Man all in the same scene, and it was more than just a cameo, but they actually had things to do. They had their own emotional arcs that were started in their own movies and got fulfilled in this film. Andrew Garfield, I definitely think, stole the show. Tobey Maguire, I gotta be honest, a little awkward. Maybe he always was, and I'm just blinded by nostalgia and love his Spider-Man movies, but like, he wasn't the best in this movie. But I think it works. I think he's meant to be this like older, wiser Spider-Man, and Andrew Garfield has like the quick one-liners, and he's very sporadic, and it's fun. I think they all play off each other really well. There's a lot of great scenes where they're talking about their web shooters, and they don't understand how Tobey Maguire's is just in his skin. There's a lot of references to memes, like all three Spider-Man pointing at each other, and Tobey Maguire's back from the previous Spider-Man movies. So it's great fun. They're so charming together, and I love to see them bounce off each other. Another cameos that I was aware of going into this is that Daredevil was indeed in this movie. He doesn't really do anything, and honestly, this isn't really anything other than a cameo and saying, hey, look it, Daredevil's in the MCU now. So it's fine. I know the MCU has done this before, so I'm not like really too upset about it, but like if you're looking at this movie isolated, it doesn't add a single thing to the plot. Same thing with Venom. Venom was the post-credits scene, and the joke was that at the end of Venom 2, Let There Be Carnage, Venom got transported into the MCU, and so at the end of the credits scene, he's just transported back. So it's kind of fun as like a gag, just being like, just kidding, we tricked you. Venom doesn't actually have anything to do with the MCU. But I do wonder if this will lead to anything else, because we do know that Vulture's going to be in the new Morbius movie, and so there are rumors that Andrew Garfield might still be the Sony Spider-Man and fight those villains, but I guess we'll see. I would not hate a Tom Hardy and Andrew Garfield movie together, though. Speaking of other villains, though, I think they all have really great motivation. Now, we knew that Doc Ock, Electro, Green Goblin, and in the trailer we saw there was going to be Lizard, and Sandman, I think, was kind of like in the trailer. But none of them were a huge surprise. And I think my issue with this was, like, way before the trailers even came out. It was like, there's so many characters going to be in this movie. Are they all going to be fleshed out? And the answer is, kind of. I think in order to really feel the full character arc of these specific villains, you need to watch every single Spider-Man movie, and honestly, even like recently. There's so many callbacks to their origin stories and their motivations for why they're doing what they're doing, so it's not really explained in this movie. This movie kind of starts you right off at the very end of all of their movies, and you're just expected to run with it. In a lot of ways, it's similar to Infinity War and Endgame. The reason that those movies are able to do so much is because they're expecting you to already watch the first act in all the other movies. William Dafoe absolutely steals the show. He is the most evil we have ever seen Green Goblin. He literally kills Aunt May, which I think was the most emotional Spider-Man scene I've ever really witnessed. And it's in that moment you realize that she really has been serving as the Uncle Ben character in this version of Spider-Man. And better than the other versions of Spider-Man, where it was like the first act Uncle Ben dies, we had 3 movies of Aunt May, and then she dies, so we are so much more connected to her than maybe any other Spider-Man mentor. And at the end of this whole movie, I think what you realize by all these elements is that this whole trilogy of Tom Holland Spider-Man was his own origin story. And rather than the traditional seeing him get power, seeing his Uncle Ben die, trying to, like, you know, be this anonymous superhero, he didn't have that. People pretty much knew he was Spider-Man immediately, and it just got worse and worse, and by the end of the second movie, the whole world knew. And where this movie ends is that every single person in the world doesn't know he's Spider-Man. So now he's able to start fresh. He now has Aunt May, who died, saying the classic line we all like to hear, with great power comes great responsibility, and so now he can take that and finally be a friendly neighborhood anonymous Spider-Man. I do have questions about the ending, though, because I don't think I fully understand how the rules of this work, which is not a huge deal, and I'm sure it'll be explained. But from initial first viewing, I think my questions are, how does it work then? Like, nobody knows he's Peter Parker, but everyone remembers Spider-Man. Like the scene with him and Happy Hogan, like, Happy just knows who Spider-Man is, and let's assume all the other Avengers, they know who Spider-Man is, they just don't know it's Peter Parker. And so you also have to wonder, like, the impact that Peter Parker had on other people's lives, does that just disappear, and it's this whole ripple effect now that all these things that did happen in history have now changed? I don't know, and it probably doesn't really matter in the long scheme, because I think the tone of where this movie wanted to get you to absolutely. The other question I have with the plot, which again will probably be explained at some point, but it's the whole, how did these villains get to this MCU timeline? The answer that we're given is that because they knew who Peter Parker was, that's the reason they came to this timeline. But pretty much all these villains have died fighting Spider-Man. And they actually tell the story of how they almost died, and they realize, like, oh wait, I was about to die, and then I got pulled into this timeline. But then my question is, why didn't other people who knew who Spider-Man was also get transported right before they died? Like Gwen Stacy. Couldn't she have been brought to this timeline the same way the villains were? Again, not a huge issue, but I think there might have been a couple things that they could have clarified here. But overall, this movie is so much fun, and if you can look past a couple of these leaps that it takes to get the plot where it needs to go, I think you're really going to enjoy it. It's a nostalgic trip featuring so many characters, and I think it really works. I think the emotional beats hit, and if you like these characters at all, you're going to love this movie. So that is my thoughts on Spider-Man No Way Home. Have you seen it? What do you think? Comment below. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you want to see more content like this, and I will see you next time.